I would be voting against Trump with more or less anyone. Because what I want really is normal politics, right? I mean, the fact that politics has taken up so much of our bandwidth of late, for 8 years, 9 years at this point, is a sign that something's wrong, right? And Trump is at the very center of that. So nothing I say in this conversation is going to come out of a feeling of my own partisanship. I happen to be registered as a Democrat, but I would vote for Mitt Romney at this point. I would campaign for Mitt Romney.
Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro engaged in a debate with the Free Press right before the election, even though this took place before the election and each of them spoke about who they were going to vote for. It's very relevant for what we're going to see going forward with the Trump administration, and that's why I wanted to highlight this video. So the entire thing is almost 2.5 hours long. So if you want to go to the Free Press YouTube page and check it out, it's worth watching. I'm going to highlight just a couple of sections of this that I think are important, so we're going to see clips of this debate between Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro, and I'm going to share my thoughts on it. Let's get into this together.
I mean, a normal Republican would be absolutely fine with me. So most of what I have to say really has nothing to do with policy, even. Trump has announced some policies that I would disagree with, and we can talk about those. But the real issue for me is that Trump is the most divisive political figure to appear in my lifetime. And, we should get into the reasons for that. But whatever you think of Trump, right, even if you think he's great, you really can't deny that he brings out the worst in us, right? He brings out the worst in both his friends and his enemies. And Bret Stephens wrote a piece on this recently. So more than anything, I just want this experience of continuous political emergency to end, right? I want that to be behind us. And from my point of view, Kamala Harris, whatever her weaknesses as a candidate, would be just a much needed return to normal politics, right? And this is, of course, this assumes that if Trump loses, he's not running again in 4 years, right? Then I think that it keeps the emergency alive. But for all its flaws, the Democratic Party is a normal political party, and the Republican Party is now a cult of personality, which I consider to be actually dangerous. So, that's really my main concern. I don't think any of this gets better until Trump gets out of politics.
And I think Sam Harris is exactly correct with what he's saying and about the idea of getting back to normal politics. This is something that I think about a lot. Basically, since Trump has come on the scene, he has kept everyone at a fever pitch for the last 8 years, and we're probably going to have this happening for the next 4 years. And even when Trump and MAGA wins, they are still aggrieved. They're still upset. There are still enemies for them to fight against. I saw a post on social media today where somebody said, they won the election. It's been a few weeks, but they still seem so unhappy. You would think they would kind of just win and say, we won. Our guy's in there now. Everything's good. We can just sort of go about their lives. But Trump keeps them at a constant fever pitch, keeps them aggrieved because he's constantly aggrieved. He's constantly upset about his enemies, perceived or real. And so there's never any opportunity for the American people to just take a breath and kind of just go outside in the sun and enjoy their lives. Everybody is constantly upset and angry. And I keep using the phrase fever pitch, but that's what we've seen under Donald Trump.
And to just draw a line under it, let's say the election was between Mitt Romney and Kamala Harris. Would you be voting for Mitt Romney or Kamala Harris?
Well, honestly, at this point, I would probably vote for Romney, but that really should not give any indication of how fully I favor Harris over Trump. I mean, I'm all in for Harris, right? I've given her money. I'm going to be honest about what I think her flaws are as a candidate, but there's just my preference is as large as it could conceivably be. But I think Ben and I and you and I agree about many of the problems in the Democratic Party. And yes, I would view a normal Republican as a corrective to that, but I don't view Trump as a corrective to that. I'm sure we'll get into this, but I think everything that Ben and I worry about on the left gets worse under 4 more years of Trump.
Ben, let's go to you.
Sure,
Obviously, you're not voting for Kamala Harris.
You may have noticed, yes. So obviously, I'm coming at this from precisely the opposite point of view. I've given money to President Trump. I've campaigned with President Trump. I brought President Trump to Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson's Ohel on October 7th, where he met with hostage families. So I'm very involved in this campaign. So I'm going to use a bit of a different model. I think that Sam is coming from the point of view that Trump is preemptively disqualified from the race. Just period, start to finish, we're done. And that ends the calculation. For me, the question is, were you better off in 2019 or are you better off in 2024? And the way that I view this political race is that basically you have this strainer that is American politics. That's the political system, and that involves the constitutional checks and balances. It involves the back and forth of politics. It involves the rhetoric. And what goes into the strainer is what the candidate brings to the table. And very often that's rhetoric, that's policy, that's staffing, that's all the mess that whatever candidate brings. And they stuff all of that stuff, that entire cholent, into the strainer. And what comes out the other end of the strainer is the thing that I'm adjudicating based upon. And after the strainer in 2019, what I got was a solid economy, the best foreign policy of my lifetime, a president whose rhetoric I very often didn't like, but who had made the country stronger in a variety of ways. And as of 2024, what I see is an administration, and Kamala Harris is the vice president of that administration, who I believe actually probably has a constitutional duty to get rid of the person above her, who that administration has produced a world that is on fire in a myriad of ways, has produced 40-year highs in inflation, has not, in fact, calmed the waters. I know Sam was talking about normalcy. The reality is that Donald Trump has not been president for the last 3.5 years. And not only have we not returned to normalcy, things seem to have gotten significantly worse. In fact, if we were going to sort of describe Donald Trump's role in American politics, I think that one of the differences between Sam and me is that Sam would sort of declare Donald Trump the murderer of American politics, where I would see Donald Trump more as the coroner of American politics, that things were really, really bad before Donald Trump actually entered the American political scene, which is how he became president of the United States in the first place. And Donald Trump simply being defeated would not make any of that go away because, frankly, it didn't in 2020. And so
I think what I would respond to this with is Donald Trump didn't create the political climate that we are in. That has been built over the past several decades, I would say, really by right-wing media, by right-wing radio, by Fox News. Again, constantly this idea of constant aggrievement, constant anger. You know, politics used to be pretty boring, and it has become entertainment over the last few decades. And I think that's really because of right-wing media. And Donald Trump just tapped into that like no one ever has before. So unlike most presidents who lost an election and just kind of went away, Donald Trump never went away. First of all, he never really admitted that he lost, and he whined and cried and continued to state that he was the winner of that election when he actually lost in 2020. And he also has had control over the Republican Party, unlike I think any politician ever has had control over a party who was not in office. You know, he was able to kill the border bill by telling Republicans not to vote for it, and he wasn't even in office. When have we ever seen that happen before? I don't know. So that's where, you know, Ben Shapiro tries to make it sound like all of these issues are because of the Democrats and the Biden administration. And yes, they were in charge of the country, but in terms of political division, Donald Trump has stoked so much of that even while he was not in office.
So the calculation for me is very simple. Donald Trump was a better president than Kamala Harris would be, with all of Donald Trump's flaws, with all of his excesses. And because we do have a very robust and durable constitutional system, almost built to hem in his flaws and excesses, what that means is that I get a lot of good policy that I wouldn't get with Kamala Harris. I do get a stronger American American presence on the world scene with regard to America's allies. I get a better economy. And I think it would serve as a corrective to a Democratic Party that seems to have spun out into a world of damaging wokeness, because the Democratic Party is either going to force itself further into this sort of left-wing corner, or they're going to have to moderate and deal with the reality, which is if they lose to Donald Trump twice in 3 election cycles, there's something deeply wrong that cannot simply be corrected by swiveling further to the left.
Now, I agree with Ben Shapiro that there's something deeply wrong with the Democratic Party. I would disagree with him that their problem is that they moved too far to the left. They actually didn't move far enough to the left in terms of economic policy. I don't think that most Americans really care about what Ben Shapiro would classify as woke. Basically anything that they don't like in entertainment or social areas, they're going to call woke. Where the Democrats screwed up is not basically listening to Bernie Sanders and other voices like Bernie Sanders about economic populism and going after policies that the left has that are much more popular than the right in terms of economics. So these are things like strengthening Social Security, Medicare for all, increasing taxes at the very top. The Democrats, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and her campaign shied away from these issues, and that's the reason that they lost, in my opinion. Not that they were too woke. They didn't really talk about woke issues that much, but they didn't really have anything to offer economically to people except essentially watered down Republican policies. And we've seen over and over again, if you're going to run as Republican light, you're going to lose. But I wanted to give you guys just a taste of this debate. The whole thing is very interesting between Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro. You definitely get the two perspectives. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Like I said, you can go to the Free Press and watch this entire debate if you want to watch the entire 2-hour plus video. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. This is Chris on Culture. I will see you in the next video.